all sound amazing. Just briefly, I'll say when I first came to Chicago, I attended Northwestern and I got really involved in Women in the Director's Chair, which was the largest and longest running festival of films by women and girls in the world at that time. It was a transformative experience. It was a community of women and girls who were just committed to the idea that together we could put together a film screening experience that would sort of transcend just going to the movies. So the film for Women in the Director's Chair, we started developing a film festival, like a 10-day film festival, almost as soon as the one the year before had just ended. It involved like over 100 people from all different kinds of walks of life, all ages and backgrounds, who came together as judges for the film festival. We invited submissions from all over the world in every kind of format, length, style. And it was a real grassroots community-based film festival effort. And then every year in March, Women's History Month, we ran this festival in locations around the city. And what was kind of unique and I think really powerful about that festival is that it was more than just the movies. It was also an opportunity to connect with people at the screenings, after the screenings, during the screenings. Sometimes it really brought people together in a way that shaped my future approach, I think, to doing film programming. That films are a communal experience. You know, we kind of like, or well, we used to until recently, we'd sit in a dark room together, kind of like experience this story or you know, documentation of an experience together. And then we come out and we kind of want to talk about it. So to create settings where we watch media together and then share our reactions and our experiences together has kind of like driven my career from that point forward. So I started as a volunteer with Women in the Director's Chair, then later joined the board, eventually got hired as program director, and then was like running the festival for a few years after that. Sadly, that film festival went the way of many others since. As an independent film festival, it was really hard to sustain. And so it ended in like 2003 or 4, something like that. But I can say, speaking for myself and for a whole lot of other women who were involved in Women in the Director's Chair, many of us have gone on to be filmmakers, film curators, film programmers. We're kind of scattered all over the country now, created a network that still continues to be mutually supportive. So I just wanted to start with that because it's been kind of such a valuable experience to do film programming in a collective kind of model and to get to know other film programmers. It's not just like a solitary field. It's something that we do in community, and that makes it so much richer. So just briefly, I'll jump forward, skip ahead and say, now I work at the University of Chicago in Arts and Public Life, where I run a monthly film series called Cinema 53 at the Harper Theater, which is based on watching films together and then having conversations afterward with directors, artists, scholars, activists, organizers, people who bring their perspectives on the topic and then share them with the audience. My sort of other hat at the University of Chicago is I do programming for the Southside Home Movie Project, which is a really unique project, about 16 years old, that collects home movies created by residents from the South Side of Chicago from around the 1920s all the way up until kind of like video took over around 1980. We have close to 500 reels of film that document basically life on the South Side for the past century through the eyes of people who've lived there. It's an incredible local treasure and such an honor to be able to work with the home movie donors who share that footage with the project, and then to represent these incredible historic documents to viewers all over the city in all kinds of programming formats. So recently during the pandemic, we created a series called Spinning Home Movies, where we invited artists from around the city, mostly Southsiders, to kind of like dig into our archive to explore the visual resource and then create a new creative piece, like add sound to the films or spoken word or create new compiled films. And then we presented those virtually online, first weekly and then monthly. And we're on episode 14 right now. And we worked with artists ranging from Jamila Woods to Seth Parker Woods to, gosh, I can't even name them all, but much to our surprise, because we're such a local project, the series has been viewed 15,000 times by viewers from around the world. And we found that this material, while it's very specific and local to the south side of Chicago, resonates far beyond our city, and has helped tell the story of Chicago to viewers who never would have seen this material otherwise. I'll stop there. I'm eager to hear from the other panelists, but I'm happy to answer any questions about archiving, film programming, curating, any of the above.
Hi, I'll go next since I am next on the slide. My name is Jamila Shillo, and big ups to Sabrina because I'm from the South Side. So yeah, I like it. I like that you're big in the South Side. Although I currently live in West Town, so I'm a sellout. I escaped. Yeah, I guess the quickest way to explain why I'm relevant to be on this panel is that I ran the Chicago Palestine Film Festival for 3 years, and 1 year before that, I was the project manager. So I was the executive director for 3 years, and then I'm currently the head of the advisory board. And the Chicago Palestine Film Festival is the world's longest running Palestinian film festival. We have been running consecutively now for 21 or 22 years. 20 years, 21 years. We've been going for a while. And it's been an interesting journey. When I joined the Palestine Film Festival, we were moving from just being a film festival to doing a little bit more work with social justice. And that is sort of maybe the flavor that I left in the Chicago Palestine Film Festival, where we opened the doors a little bit more, and it became less of a sort of a clique of people who were very like specifically wanting to see documentaries about homes getting bulldozed in Palestine, to people who really looking for narrative stories, who are looking for the human experience of being Palestinian, for recognizing that Palestinians are not just a monolithic people, but that they come in all colors, shapes, sizes, sexual orientations, religions, and that there's a whole world out there that we're going to experience, and that also we're not just defined by the current conflict and the oppression that's been thrust upon the people. So that's sort of been an interesting journey because it's a mindset that a lot of people had. So, and a little bit about my background personally, not just the film festival background, is yes, I graduated from Columbia College. I have a degree in television production. I produced everywhere. So I worked for Harpo, and I worked at the Colbert Report when it was still the Colbert Report before he was at late night. I did like all those shows where they like flip your house and give you a new kitchen in 3 days or whatever. I worked on like all of them. I've produced on those. All those the bunch of comedy specials on TBS, and actually one of my first love is political comedy and satire. I toured with Second City. And most recently, I wrote a children's book called Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine, after my son Laith, who is currently 3. And actually, just before I got on this call, had a meltdown in the middle of the store because I wouldn't buy him a Spider-Man costume. So it's been an interesting journey. I hope that I can kind of answer your questions about what it's like to run a film festival, what it's like to work really hard to get doors to be open, especially when people have a strange idea about what your film festival is about. And I think that, as for the Chicago Palestine Film Festival, it's a hurdle that we're constantly having to deal with, is that people like are a little bit like a little touchy about Palestine. They're like, whoa, I don't know if we want this in our venue, or we want to show this film, or we're not comfortable with the subject matter. And it is the world that we live in right now, is that there is a lot of fear-based decision making, and sort of how to get around that. That's sort of, I feel like those are the struggles as a film festival that we've had. And then also introducing our own audience to new ideas. So it's twofold. It's introducing people who have never heard of Palestine and Palestinian films to the films, and sort of introduce them to like this idea that we are human, and, we do live life and make movies, and sometimes good movies, sometimes bad movies, we're not just terrorists or victims. And then on the flip side, talking to our own community and really showing them how this is a valuable resource that can sort of benefit their own lives and their own understanding and their own representation, and helping them take their representation into their own hands. So I could talk about this all day, but we only have an hour, so I will move on. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm extraordinarily flattered, and thank you for picking a semi-decent picture of me. So thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
I guess we're going in order. I'll just jump in. I want to thank you again, Sydney, for inviting me to this conversation. I was thinking, I was like, oh, how do I present do I talk about my role at DePaul? So I'm just going to go off and say that I'm the assistant director at the Center for Black Diaspora at DePaul University. And it's pretty much a cultural center, but it's also a space that does scholarly work on the Black experience here in the US and around the globe. And I think we also, part of my work there is to build and develop our film collection and films that come from different places around the globe that talk about the Black experience, which kind of spawned the creation of the Black Diaspora Short Film Festival, which we had this from March till April, February till early March. And it came out of a desire to create a venue where we can have really dynamic stories about the Black experience that has nothing to do with trauma, because there's so much of that that's discussed all the time. And so there was a lot of joy, and there was a lot of other things there. And that was sort of the intent, and to bring filmmakers from France, from South Africa, from here in the US. And it was really, really wonderful experience, because I feel at the end of the festival, all the filmmakers became great friends and are probably going to go off and make films together, which is one of the great part of building this whole thing. My background, it's quite interesting. My background, my studies undergrad was pretty much sort of like urban planning and East Asian studies, right? So pretty much China and sort of like China, Japan, Korea, which is very interesting because now I work at a center that speaks specifically to the Black experience. But what that training has done, it's sort of like trained my eyes to see bigger and to also sort of think outside of the box. And my introduction to film, I think, came from my training. I did my graduate school in France, where I lived for 7 years, and continued the whole studies of sort of architecture and urban planning. And I think the idea of the built environment and space very much influenced my interest in film, so that when I came to DePaul and started and enrolled in an MFA film program, I already had the eye. And that's sort of where all of this sort of developed. And from being a film student and a filmmaker, it was just a natural, it was just a natural move to just like watching a copious amount of films and cataloging all of them, especially films that, that touch the Black experience in parts of the globe people never thought about. And so, and that's how I came to the idea of like, you know what, let's put together a festival. Let's bring this all together. And so that's what spawned the whole thing. And that whole hybridity is pretty much what got placed into that festival. And I'll stop there because I too could go on for a while. I'll just wait for questions. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Sophie, and yeah, I currently work at the Chicago Latino Film Festival. My background, I went to Northwestern for film production, and when I was in school, it was just like all production all the time. I did it in all my free time. I was just so intent on, I was like gonna move to Los Angeles after graduating. I was gonna do the whole like full-time film production thing. And I just like I loved it. And I still work in freelance film production occasionally, but like I got really, really burnt out. And I actually had never been to a film festival until after I graduated from college. And I went to a few. I was kind of traveling around, going to a few film festivals for a film that, not one of my films, a film that I had worked on. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. How had I never thought about this kind of curatorial aspect of the film making and distribution process? And I just kind of fell in love with film festivals and the idea of it, and started to try and get involved with festivals here in Chicago. And so, I do not have actually as much experience. I graduated undergrad about 4 years ago. And so like if anyone has any questions, like anyone who's like an undergrad, still a student or whatever, in terms of like kind of paths that you can take or things that you can try, like post grad, I'm happy to answer any of those questions, because my path after I graduated was like kind of strange and serendipitous and wonderful, and I feel very, very lucky to have ended up where I am. But sometimes that's just how these things go, when you're trying to, especially in film, there's infinite paths you can take. And I knew that I wanted to just like try a bunch of stuff and see what happened. And I ended up here, and I'm really, really happy I did. So yeah, happy to answer any questions about that. But I'm sure we'll get to those in a bit.
Awesome. Amazing. So exciting. So great. And so I guess for the sake of maybe getting a little bit of detail, and anyone can answer this question, but what would you say your day-to-day looks like for you in terms of like working in this environment? Like what, if someone wants to give like a general rundown of what your day looks like, where you have your hands, what skills, things that you feel, make it navigable, if anyone wants to answer that question. And then after that question, if you all have any questions, please put them in the chat. I can read them out loud if you have them, while we have everyone here.
I can start with the day-to-day, just to, so when I was executive director of the Chicago Palestine Film Festival, a lot of the day is spent emailing, which is just so exciting. But a big chunk of it is actually kind of people management, right? Because with our film festival, it's 2 weeks long. We're usually showing 10 films and like 10 shorts, and they're on different days and they're different schedules. And a lot of it is like one person. I always said the executive director job is a job where you have enough work for 2 people to like not really do a lot, and 1 person to do an extraordinary amount of work. And I think that I see people nodding their heads, so hopefully you guys are agreeing with me. It is a lot of just kind of juggling personalities. So, you have your teams that are procuring the films, who are, writing the descriptions, who are making sure that the filmmakers get paid, who are sort of negotiating the deals, negotiating the fees, booking the flights. And, what you want to do as an executive director is sort of create systems that are in place so people can do these things without having to run every single decision by you. But if there's a problem, that they can notify you sort of instantly, so you can swoop in and fix it, if that makes sense. So, so a lot of the day is, if it's a festival that already exists, a lot of your day is really just going to be checking in on people, making sure they're doing the things that they say they're going to be doing, especially if you're working with volunteers. Making sure that things are going as scheduled, and that you have people in the places that you need them to be at certain times. If you're just starting with a film festival, I think that a lot of your day is actually spent sort of schmoozing a little bit, right? Like you're emailing vendors, and you're emailing sponsors, and you're calling this person and you're calling that person. And maybe you're taking someone out to coffee to see if they'll donate $500 for this, or, enticing some college students to come and be volunteers and that sort of thing, So yeah, I know that's not like a specific answer to your question. Like, it's not like at 9 a.m. I did this and at 10 a.m. I did this, but I think it's more so that every day is a little bit different. And it is you're either solving problems or you're creating ways of doing things, so that, at least in my case, our goal is to make sure that our film festival is living on and growing. So I think that was an answer that people like, hope that was helpful.
I wanted to pop in and talk about, the Black Diaspora Short Film Festival was an inaugural festival, so it was the first iteration, and I have to say that the work involved in that process, especially if you have a small team, is to know that it's laborious, and that your eyeballs are going to be like red from screening all the submissions that you're getting. And I think one of the difficult thing is getting 300 short films and thinking about all the steps that go into that process. So getting the submissions, getting together your jury, basically creating a quota for yourself, like I will watch 6 short films a day, so I can really judge them very well. And so not when I'm tired or I'm hungry or feeling crabby, but to really put in all that time. And it sounds glamorous, the idea of a film festival, but there's just so much work involved in that process. And it's also keeping in touch with all the folks who submitted, who want updates on their submission, and folks who didn't read the instructions and sent you a 40-minute thing when your thing said you only wanted thing less than 15 minutes. And then they go in a diatribe about why their film should still be considered. So I feel like the glamour of sort of doing programming, it's great because, as a programmer, you're like, oh my God, I get to watch all these amazing films. But then you're in this position of working with a jury who have different aesthetics and coming to a place of making a decision because this person really loves experimental film and you might not like that particular, it might not be your genre. And so it's really complicated. So I feel like ironing out those details, particularly if you're an inaugural festival who's just beginning to figure out and to find their footing in the whole terrain of film festivals, because there's a ton of Black film festivals around the country. Some are well known. And here's one that, from a very modest, within a university, from a Black cultural space that focuses on the Black experience here in the US and around the world. And so trying to reach our tentacles and not to compete with other festivals that are happening in the city or in the country, you know what I mean? But to just create your own unique thing. And I think for me, that was the intent, right? Was to just sort of create a storefront kind of an experience rather than go out trying to be like everybody, everywhere else. And just the amount of labor that goes into it, I think people should know that it's a team effort. Like you, the programmer, you're not doing it alone at all. You need folks to come in and help you with it.
And
I'll
I think
just say that.
Amazing what you both kind of touch on is like the different roles that go into this. So like people who are obviously making sure people get paid, there's and people who are screening, and so it's very interesting. I like appreciate kind of breaking down like who is a part of the team. And so I guess like does give some insight to like if someone knowing nothing about film festivals wanted to get into either programming or being a part of like this like planning logistics part of it, what would you recommend? How would they even do that in terms of getting, it's hard, I know it's a difficult question, but starting, how would you recommend someone if they're interested in any one of those type of roles?
I would say there are so many incredible festivals and series around the city of Chicago that you can just jump in as a volunteer and kind of like start getting your feet wet and start getting to know the players and the roles. And you can do anything from like help set up the mics at the beginning of the show and all the folding chairs or whatever, to picking up visiting artists from the airport, to writing descriptions for the film catalog. I mean, there's so many pieces of it, doing design work. I mean, there's just a lot of ways to kind of like enter the experience, to enter the team. And I think that I actually can't think of a single film festival that wouldn't welcome a really dedicated volunteer, even someone who's kind of just trying to find their way. So I definitely think that's the first place to start. I think it's hard to kind of like get a job immediately, but it's such a warm community in Chicago that you can definitely start making contacts and kind of like weasel your way in that way.
I can also just say that film festival skills translate to like other parts of your life. Like, the being highly organized, if you're highly organized, you will be one of the most valuable assets a film festival can ever have. And highly organized people that like, I don't want to say like have common sense, but have common sense. Like they're so valuable everywhere. So hone that skill as a volunteer at a film festival, doing something you like and getting to watch movies for free. And then, I don't know, take that job to like Google, make $1 million, it sounds strange, but I'm telling you, like it's a skill set that's worth something.
No, I agree. I think that, these skills are very translatable, even though like film festivals themselves are a very kind of specific thing where it's like a lot of people are like, how do I get into this? How do I, kind of crack the surface and get into something that is kind of specific? But yeah, as Jamila said, like it's like got to be organized. For me, it's like communication was my point of entry, just because like, like it's been said, most of our days are spent communicating with people, oftentimes over email. Like that's kind of, at times that's 90% of my job. I mean, with film festivals, especially if it's like an annual thing, like my film festival is annual. And so we're on like a cycle essentially. So every single day is different. Every week is kind of like a new phase in organizing this event. And all of it requires communication. And whether you're communicating with, on the programming side of things, whether you're communicating with filmmakers and distributors, whether you're, involved with sponsorships and you're communicating with sponsors, or you're part of the marketing team and you're communicating with, you're communicating with the public, whether that be for marketing or ticketing, or just trying to get the community engaged and get people interested in the festival or, whatever screening event that you're doing. I mean, so much of this is organizing and communicating well. And so like, those are very broad skills, but at the same time, I mean, it's great that you can get involved in those kinds of ways. Like, for instance, the way that I got involved with my first film festival was like, I started out as an intern at the Chicago International Children's Film Festival. And I was one of the first interns that like started in the festival cycle. So even though I did not know what I was doing at all, basically I was just kind of given this email. It was just like, communicate with a bunch of people. Do you have communication skills? Okay, great, go for it. And it was just kind of like this crash course in having to like, okay, I need to speak professionally with all of these filmmakers and all of these distributors, and like reaching out to people and asking for certain things. And just having the ability to like run this, festival email was kind of my point of entry that allowed me to like take on more responsibilities there. And so, yeah, these skills there's things that we use in our everyday, and they're really applicable even to this very specific kind of work that we do.
That's great. Yeah, it makes sense how it translates. And I think someone said like you can do that, but still like work with film. You can do the thing you love. You can do programming. You can make these very specific type of events, which I think is amazing. And so if you kind of touched on someone's question, AJ, hi AJ, is how did you get into film festival programming? Why do you do what you do, and what do you enjoy most about the job? I think those are really, really great questions, AJ, thanks.
I think I like discovering all these new films and these new creators and all these incredibly talented creatives. I feel like it's almost like, I feel like if you've ever seen this, the person on the beach carrying around this metal thing, hoping to like they're gonna pick up like someone's wedding ring or like a necklace at the beach. And I almost feel like I'm that character on the beach walking around with that, what do you call that thing? Where it goes off when there's something valuable that goes, that's like, and it's like, oh my God, there's this film. It's so amazing. And I'll talk to people ad nauseum about it. And I think that's when I realized I really like film programming, is because I will watch a copious amount of films. I could totally watch like 6 films in a day, and I could talk to you about it for over 12 hours. And so that was a clue to me, like, you know what, you might actually like this. And I also think, as assistant director at the Center for Black Diaspora, my main role is programming, but not film per se, but programming events, like an artist who's coming, a writer, a scholar. And so I already, I could just do all that with my eyes closed. And so it was easy to transfer those skills into not just booking events and speakers and artists and all the stuff that could also be filmic kind of programming. And I think it's the idea of discovery. I really do see myself sort of on a sand, sort of like going around looking for those wonderful gems to include in a lineup for a film. And I feel like the film festival that just happened was sort of that experience of like, look at all the finds that we all, and it wasn't just my sole decision, but it was a committee, a jury of folks doing it, but that we were all out on the beach with those things, looking for those gems. And we were so happy with the collection that we gathered. And I think that's the idea, is the idea that you will discover something wonderful that will have you, that you'll be in awe and stunned about, and that you can also share that with someone else as well. And that, I think, is something every programmer might have, is this willingness and desire to share it. Like, once you found it, you must share it. You cannot keep it to yourself. And I think and I see heads nodding. And so, yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that. And I think that's why I really enjoy it. Enjoy doing it. And luckily for me, at the center, I can program. I'm a programmer for non-filmic things, but now with this new short film festival that that's gonna become sort of like a tradition, I think it's just a natural transition to do something like this. And my experience started out, I did the whole, I'm sort of the MFA film student who went to Sundance and did the volunteering and slept on like an air mattress with 12 other people, and did the whole film festival thing. So, we all have these sort of like experiences that we bring to the table, but at the very core of it is the idea of the love for storytelling and the love for sharing those stories with other people, right? And so if you're really driven by that, I think you can find a place in it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's so incredibly well put, this idea of like discovery and being so excited about things that you just absolutely have to share them with people. I think that's, programming is, it's creative in a way, even, and I feel like that's where some of the creative aspects of it come in, is like this curatorial process exercises those creative muscles that I sometimes miss when I'm doing, because like oftentimes programming is not creative. Sometimes it's emailing in spreadsheets for weeks straight, which is, fun in its own way if you get a kick out of that, which I do sometimes. But yeah, I mean, like, in the cycle of a festival, like the beginning of it, like it, speaking from my own experience, the festivals that I've worked for are kind of on like an 8-month-ish cycle. And the first 3 or 4 are all about discovery. And in my case, with the Latino Film Festival, we take submissions and we also, solicit films. We like pour through festival programs and like watch trailers, look at information about these films and reach out to them to see if we can get screeners. And for me, that's one of my favorite things about this job, is like, not only I love getting submissions, because the submissions come in at the same time and we're constantly watching things, and writing our little reviews on every single film. And it's the surprises that come in are the most beautiful things, where you're just not expecting something. And sometimes, someone will submit something on Film Freeway or whatever, and you just will be totally floored. Like maybe they'll create kind of a weird Film Freeway page and you're like, I don't know what this is going to be like. And it just blows you out of the water. Like that thing I love so much. But also the digging, the discovery of pouring through film festival programs and seeing what's out there And it feels so exploratory to me. It's this really interesting process of just like, you think that you're only going to find so many things, and all of a sudden you have a list of 500 films, all of them you want to see, because there are the things that are well recognized that play big festivals and that have been around, and you want those for your event too. Things that have played big European festivals like Berlin, or in the US like Sundance. But then there's the things that are just these hidden gems where if you dig deep enough, you find these wonderful things. And like the ability to being in a position to find something that hasn't been seen anywhere, that has only been seen in like some teeny tiny film festival in Chile or something like that, and be able to bring that to the US and bring it to Chicago and show our audience here, show our friends and our family and everyone in the community is so special. And like when it comes time for us to announce our program, I don't shut up about it. Basically, like I really try not to, choose favorites and advertise that, because I want to love all of our films and like have people watch all of them. But I mean, I get so overly excited about our program, because it's like now we can finally share this with people, and trying to engage like the filmmakers too, even virtually, even in the last year, trying to engage filmmakers virtually across all of Latin America and Spain and Portugal with audiences in the US and all across the US, is a really special thing. And trying to make these really remote connections and have them all converge in Chicago is amazing. And like having filmmakers be so happy, like filmmakers who it's their first film, whether it's a short or a feature, and they made this film with the tiniest budget and they never thought that their film would make it outside of Brazil or Guatemala or whatever. And to be able to like share that and share in the excitement of both filmmakers and audience, and like sharing these things is just incredible. I'm gonna stop talking now because I just get so excited about it.
Yeah, we have a few other questions. Thank you both. That made me want to watch a movie now. I'm like, I wanna like go in. We have a few other questions, which is so great. I think so. What we'll do is Anna had a question for people who are creatives and thoughts about on the other side when it comes to submitting. You all had kind of talked about there's a lot that goes into the process, but any tips, anything that you would say to someone who is interested in submitting something for a fest?
Read the instructions fully, fill out all the paperwork, send a working link. Start there. I feel like that's fairly important. And then on the flip side of it is submit to know what you want to say with your film, and then submit to festivals that fit who you are. Like we get some of the strangest submissions in the Chicago Palestine Film Festival. Like we will get submissions from, and we're fairly open. Like our whole thing is like it has to portray Palestine in a positive light, or the filmmaker is Palestinian, or there's a Palestinian actor. But then we'll get something and it'll just be like so obviously not any of those things, and that person was just clicking submit, and it was very, very obvious. Don't do that, because you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. So I would say like look at the messaging that the film festival is putting out. Like we're the storytellers of Palestine, so if that doesn't fit what you're putting out there, and that's okay. You can even just email them and say, hey, do you think this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, does it fit your criteria? They might be very honest with you and say like, no, it doesn't, but here's our friend at the Asian American Film Festival, you should submit to them. Like, you know what I mean? So there's read the fine print, I think, is my answer to that question. That's the biggest thing that you can do. Also, I accept presents, just chocolates, candies, flowers, whatever, make it romantic. It's all good, whatever you can afford. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so.
I think something that's really valuable, I agree with everything you just said. Like all of that is so important. Even the most basic things, like just reading the instructions and filling out all the things that you need to fill out, including stills from your film. If you have a trailer, we love trailers. Like throw that in there, you know, like make it like a thing that's enticing to look at if we're going through submissions on Film Freeway. But something that's really important to me and that I tell filmmakers all the time is be personal. Don't just, I mean, maybe I'm like, you know, maybe I'm, you know, creating more work for myself even by saying this, but I appreciate it so much as a programmer when people just reach out to me, honestly. And sometimes I can't help them. Sometimes it's people being like, am I eligible? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. But a lot of times when people reach out and are like, hey, I want to submit my film. How do I do it? And I'm like, go to Film Freeway or send me a link or whatever. Even if I redirect them to the submission platform, to Film Freeway or whatever, I know who you are now. I remembered that you emailed me. I remembered something maybe about the project. Like, and if you do reach out to a programmer, like include just the tiniest bit of information about the project. But honestly, it really helps. It really, really helps because then we remember you. We have some sort of connection to what you're doing, what your project is. And so then if you go and submit it, you're not just one more film in the thousands of films that we're looking at this year. We have just, even if we get a million emails a day, like there's still like, we're still going to remember this connection. And that for me is really important. And that's something that I tell to filmmakers all the time, especially when you're like working with a limited submission budget. And sometimes it just really helps to be exceptionally nice and reach out to a programmer and just be like, in the nicest way possible, please can I submit for free? And usually we're just like, yeah, absolutely. Totally. And all you have to do is ask, you know? And I feel like I've talked to a lot of other programmers who feel the same way. I don't think it's necessarily universal, but that's how I kind of approach it. It really, really helps.
Very useful intel there. And we have 2 more questions before we probably have to close out, which are all really great questions. Again, I appreciate you all so much, people asking questions and also you all sharing. Sabrina, I was wondering if you could maybe answer Adon's question that they have here. And that's mostly about how to approach sponsors, donations, maintaining those relationships. I was wondering, did you have to do something like that in terms of like the Southside Home Movie Project? It's very small and grassroots, and also with the previous fest that you mentioned. And Joelle, if you have any comments about that too, just because you both kind of started some things from the beginning. So do you have anything to say to that question there?
Absolutely. Yeah, sponsorship. I mean, it's all about sponsorship. You can't really get very far unless you have some backers of some kind. During my days at Women in the Director's Chair, we would be scrambling for like a veggie platter from Jewel Osco or something, or just kind of like a gift card from Chase or something, so we got pretty good at describing why people should, kind of invest in our festival. And the story was all about community. It's not about like, we're not a product, and you're not going to, like buy people through our festival. But the idea is that when people come through the doors to the film festival, they're having an experience, and it's not just about the movie, but it's about the scene, the people who are there, the excitement, the arts, what they feel. And that if, you can tell the story to a potential sponsor that if you want to be a part of that experience, we can find a place for you, so just about anybody can kind of like find a niche to sponsor a film festival. There's a million different ways to do it. You can, give raffle prizes or something, or donate food, or kind of like, we had like car services donating, rides for artists. So we would just kind of tell people that we would be happy to like, give them ads in the program book or announce them or whatever, but mostly just having them in some way visibly associated with the experience of like a film night or an opening night or a closing night or some kind of gathering, was really our biggest selling point, the warmth and excitement around the event that we create.
I was going to add to that. I think it's very interesting. The Black Diaspora Short Film Festival was an inaugural festival that happened during the time of COVID, which made it easy actually for us to launch it then, because we didn't have to be concerned about getting a theater and, or having, if it was on campus, if we were going to do it, would be in proximity to campus, or do we use facets theater? There weren't all these logistical issues, which minimize a lot of costs that would have been associated with the festival. And I also think you have a lot more participation that happened because the festival was virtual. And so you had folks from all over coming to this festival for the first time, a festival that was just happening for the first time. And so in thinking about that, I feel like the idea, creating something that was essentially kind of like a storefront during COVID minimized a lot of the cost of the festival. I think moving forward will be very interesting, right? About how we'll pivot into an in-person experience, having been baptized without it. So in terms of financing, and because of the minimal cost for the first time doing this festival, I think, thankfully, we are very grateful to DePaul and to the School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences that pretty much bankrolled the whole thing. And so it's, it was very, and it wasn't super expensive too. So let's just see if that, continues moving forward in future iterations of the festival. But as far as sponsorship is concerned, I think, I don't know how Sabrina does this, but there is, getting sponsors within a university, you have to work with the development department. Because if you're going to go ask, the Mellon Foundation for 10 grand and DePaul has already asked them for 50, they'll give 10. So it's a little bit sort of hairy when you have a festival within an institution. You have to work with the development department first for it to work, and to see how your funding and corporate sponsorship stuff can work. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Very different. Yeah, it's interesting, those two different perspectives. Well, for the sake of time, I want to get this last question. If you want to, if everyone wants to, chime in. How has your experience as a filmmaker, if you identify as a filmmaker, because I know we have a few people who are, I think all of you, possibly. How's that influenced what you do now?
It's really hard for me to watch a bad movie, if that makes sense. I think like I noticed like I'm like, ugh, why didn't they edit out that frame? I just saw it, like your subtitles are misspelled. You're like, they're like, I hate to say that. It does influence you a little bit because I think production quality sometimes maybe matters to me a little more than it should for certain. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I have to look at the heart of this film because the bones are not as good as they should be, but the heart is there. So, you got to make that call, I think, for me. Also, I just, I like being around, I'm like, I'm more of a, I worked in TV production. I feel like TV people are like way more practical than film people. So like, we're like, all right, we got to just get it done. We only have this amount of time. We only have this amount of money and it's going to air in 3 days. Like, just get it done. Right. So like, I sort of understand that like aspect of it. So sometimes I'm like, this film, yeah, it could have been like, I feel like I watch sometimes films through that sort of weird lens of someone who like has a very practical side to creating these things. I don't know if that, like what that even means really, like when it comes to what I like and what I don't like, but it definitely has an effect on me, I think. I don't know if anybody else can understand that experience, but yeah.
I think for me, watching a film, I definitely have a critical eye because I see all the flaws. I see the poor lighting, I see the bad sound, I hear the wind while the actor is talking, like all the sort of like the stuff that maybe someone else would not pick up, like, oh my God, there's the shadow of the lamp in the back. And maybe it's an aesthetic choice. And I tell myself, oh, it must have been an aesthetic choice why that was done. And I think that's one of the reasons I think it could be good. And I feel like the films that I can get lost in without trying to deconstruct every layer of cinematography, lighting, and storytelling, where I'm just so wrapped up in this warm blanket that the filmmaker has tossed on me, then I know that I'm doing a good job. And I know that I don't have my filmmaker hat on anymore. I'm just wrapped up, and that's it. And it can be a blessing and a curse sometimes, because if it's a genre of film that you're not particularly into, like horror, then you kind of you have to sort of, I think, sort of stretch yourself, just stretch yourself. And but I'm grateful. I don't think I'd be interested in a film. Well, there are people who love films that aren't filmmakers, but I think being a filmmaker myself, I come into it with an extra set of eyes. Yeah, for sure.
For me, it really informs the way that I communicate with people, and that I think about the filmmaker side of things, essentially. Like I you know, in my own like filmmaking, I'm at the mercy of other film programmers, and I know what it's like to be submitting your workplaces, and it's really daunting. And so for me, something I love our filmmakers so much. I love them so much. Like as in my position as the programmer, like I do like a gajillion things, but they all have to do with the films, essentially. So everything that falls under the umbrella of the films from start to finish. And I love that, because I love communicating with our filmmakers. I love watching their work. I feel so lucky to be able to do that. And it makes programming really, really hard, because I so desperately want to celebrate so many more of the films and the filmmakers than we have space in our program. And our program is honestly kind of enormous, and it still feels too small every year, because there's so many more things that I want to include. And that absolutely should be there. It's, there are so many factors as to like why something is selected or not, or whether it fits into the program or not. But sending out those rejections is like the most painful experience to me, because I know how it feels. I've been there. I'm still there. I want to just make everyone happy. But also like getting past that point and working with the filmmakers like whose films we selected and we're working toward this event. It's a really special thing, and I like relating to people and to the work on the level of a filmmaker, and not just to me it's kind of humbling. It kind of takes me down a few notches and is like, okay, I'm not in this ridiculous position of power or anything. I just want to relate to people as a person. And I think that's helpful for me. It's humbling. It gives me a lot of perspective, and it helps me communicate with all of the people that I communicate with on a daily basis. And I think makes everything a little bit more human, more personal. And that to me is really important. That's something that I really value. And like the film festival I work for we just finished our 37th film festival. I've only been there for 3. And this festival has always in 37 years had this reputation of like a team that really values working with people on a really human level. And so that's something that's really important to me personally, like as me, but also as continuing this reputation and this legacy of this festival that's been around for a really long time. And so for me, that's really helpful, is kind of like taking me down to this level of just interacting in a more personal and a more human human way in an industry where things can feel very businessy, and like, we're judging people's films and selecting them for things, but I don't want it to feel that way. I want it to be a celebration of everyone's work.
And sometimes you get to watch a filmmaker grow, which is pretty awesome. Like you'll have somebody that submitted 1 year, and if you work with the film festival for multiple years, like maybe the first thing they ever sent is like, they're still growing. You can see potential, like, you know what I mean? But like, that it's not quite there yet. And then by year 5, you're like, my God, this person is going to win an Oscar. Like and it's amazing in fact, I feel like I have several examples of something like that, where it was like a young filmmaker that started off, and, or we would have them in the festival, like we pick one of their shorts or something like that. And then, years later, they have a film now, and it's, Oscar nominated, or Idris Elba's in it or something. And I'm like, that's so cool. I'm going to email them and tell them congratulations, like it's awesome.
I'm not a filmmaker, so I can't really answer that question directly, but I will just say that exact experience just happened with us this year. We did a work in progress screening a few years ago from Garrett Bradley, and this year she was nominated for an Oscar for her work. So it was like that amazing thing of like, oh my God, we knew her when. It's an incredible feeling to watch an artist's trajectory like that and feel like you maybe played a tiny role in their growth and success.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. This was so amazing to have this, like, hear you all have this conversation. I appreciate it so much. If you all would like to share any contact information, Instagram, websites, anything like that, share what you feel is comfortable. Thank you so much again. I have a quick little poll to speak of business for any of the people who are attending. This is just so give us information just to make sure that we can kind of keep doing events and things that you feel like are, beneficial to you and contribute to the stuff you want to hear. Again, I just want to give like such a thank you to our panelists. You all were so wonderful. It was so amazing to hear about the work that you all do and the perspectives you all bring. I just greatly appreciate it. I'm going to close out for the sake of time. Thank you for those 5 extra minutes. I know Zoom fatigue is real. I know it's hard to stay at a screen, so I appreciate it so much. I'll hang around at the end if anyone has any questions or anything, but to our panelists, thank you all so much again. I appreciate it so greatly and hope you have a good rest of your night.